Part 20. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 191. When they held their hands together, a faint demonic energy suddenly emerged from He Tongtong's palm, and then tried to force its way into his palm. But facing the ironclad palm defense, the scarce demonic energy eventually returned in vain, and then returned to He Tongtong's body. Looking at He Tongtong, whose expression did not change at all, and who had no reaction to the faint demonic energy just now, Zhang Fengjai forcibly suppressed the trace of murderous aura that emerged in his heart, and a trace of thinking appeared in his eyes. At this time, he seemed to vaguely know the real reason why the business of the commercial street occupying the Feng Shui treasure land was so depressed. Tongtong, although it has been nearly 10 years since I graduated from college, I have never forgotten the whole fish feast you made when we were interns and shared a house in our senior year. After Zhang Fengjai and He Tongtong's hands were loosened, Zhu Zhenjun said with a touch of warm memories in his eyes. I came here today, not only to see how my old classmates have changed over the years, but also to taste your exquisite cooking skills. When Zhu Zhenjun mentioned the shared life when graduation was approaching, He Tongtong's eyebrows also flashed a trace of tenderness, but when she saw the luxury sports car parked in front of the hotel, her face suddenly revealed a trace of bitter persuasion. Xiaozu, you were born in poverty back then, and you often had no food to eat, so you thought the whole fish feast I made was delicious, but in fact it was just the most ordinary home-cooked dish. Now that you are successful in your career, you must often go to high-end restaurants and enjoy the delicacies made by truly top chefs. I am afraid you can't get used to the simple meals made by a housewife like me. Don't embarrass me in front of your brothers. After hearing He Tongtong's persuasion with a hint of inferiority, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but turn his head and look at Zhu Zhenjun, with a look of doubt in his eyes. After killing the evil lowly doll that hurt Panswitting, Shen Loxi once privately introduced Zhu Zhenjun's growth experience in detail. During college, Zhu Zhenjun had achieved a transformation in his life in just 3 or 4 years through the struggle of self-employment and became a top rich man with a net worth of over 100 million. Now, in the eyes of He Tongtong, who has a good relationship with him, he has become a poor boy who has no food to eat. This shows that Zhu Zhenjun has been deliberately hiding his secrets of being a rich second generation and a rich man. But why did he do this? If he really likes He Tongtong, then under the influence of his obese body, he should show his rich conditions, so as to increase his competitive advantage and hope. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai carefully observed He Tongtong's face. The husband and wife palaces on both sides of the eyebrows are dim, indicating that she has not married yet. The male and female palaces under the eyebrows are not only dim, but also have an irrecoverable crack in the middle, indicating that she has suffered a deep betrayal, and thus closed the door to love in despair. Through He Tongtong's not-so-smooth face, he vaguely guessed why Zhu Zhenjun, who had an abnormal human mind, deliberately concealed his identity as a rich second-generation and top tycoon. As for whether his guess was accurate or not, judging from the affection in Zhu Zhenjun's eyes when he looked at He Tongtong, he must have confessed to him completely next, so that he could ask for her opinion on whether he could achieve marriage with her. Tongtong, I drove here from the provincial capital this time just to taste the whole fish feast you made by yourself. Do you really have the heart to see me go back hungry? Faced with He Tongtong's refusal, Zhu Zhenjun immediately pretended to be pitiful and begged, or threatened in a coquettish way. In response, He Tongtong looked at Zhang Fengjai helplessly, hoping that he could persuade Zhu Zhenjun to give up the request to destroy her perfect image. Wanting to eat the whole fish feast was fake, and taking the opportunity to pursue He Tongtong was real, so Zhang Fengjai said very cooperatively. Sister Tongtong, although I haven't known Brother Zhu for a long time, I often hear him mention how delicious the whole fish feast you carefully prepared is. So, just to satisfy my curiosity as a younger brother, please trouble Sister Tongtong to make it once. Okay. Hearing Zhang Fengjai's request and Zhu Zhenjun's longing for the whole fish feast, He Tong Tong could only smile bitterly and nodded in agreement. Afterwards, He Tong Tong took them into the lobby of the hotel, arranged them at a table near the window-sill, and personally brewed tea, then turned to the kitchen behind the lobby to prepare the whole fish feast. "Brother, how is it?" Zhu Zhenjun hurriedly asked in a low voice after He Tong Tong entered the kitchen. "Very good." After pouring a cup of Longjing tea, which was fragrant but of average quality, Zhang Fengjai deliberately changed the subject and praised. Although Sister Tong Tong looked a little haggard due to the hard work, her appearance and temperament are definitely the top beauty. In fact, he indirectly expressed his inner dissatisfaction by praising He Tong Tong. Because after experiencing many supernatural things, he and Zhu Zhenjun have a close relationship like brothers. If he wants him to help, he can just say it directly, without any need to hint in a roundabout way. "Brother, I'm not asking you about Tong Tong's appearance and temperament, I want to know why her business is so bad." Zhu Zhenjun, who didn't see Zhang Fengjai's dissatisfaction, quickly told his true intentions. In response, Zhang Fengjai took a sip of the fragrant tea from the glass, and then continued to joke with a smile. "Brother Zhu, you are a successful businessman worth tens of billions. The trouble of Sister Tong Tong's business depression is not what you are best at. Why do you ask me, who has never done business? Brother, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have concealed my selfish motives for bringing you here." At this time, Zhu Zhenjun finally heard the dissatisfaction in Zhang Fengjai's joking tone, and hurriedly stood up to apologize. Seeing that Zhu Zhenjun finally realized his mistake, Zhang Fengjai put down the glass and reminded him solemnly. "Brother Zhu, since leaving the Shushan Taoist temple and coming to Ningji city, you are the only brother I have recognized so far. So, whether it is a temporary loan or taking the initiative to ask you for help, I have never concealed anything. I hope that when you need my help, you can also tell the truth without any concealment." "Brother, I know," Zhu Zhenjun nodded quickly with a touch of emotion in his eyes. Then he sat back in his chair, turned his head to look at the commercial street outside the window, and began to tell how he met He Tong Tong and his feelings for her. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 192. Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant. In fact, Zhu Zhenjun, who was born in a top wealthy family, was not so fat at the beginning under the very strict aristocratic etiquette teaching, and his personality was also gentle and normal. But when he was 12 years old, he encountered two accidents in succession, which completely changed his body shape and gradually distorted his normal human thinking. The first accident was that he suddenly got a very strange disease and needed to take a hormone-containing medicine every week, which caused his body to become uncontrollably fat. The second accident was that his mother who loved him suddenly passed away, and the third wife, that is, his father's second concubine, who had always been hostile to him, was promoted. This made him suppressed and excluded everywhere in the family, resulting in a great change in his personality. Originally, with his intelligence that was close to that of a demon and his top aristocratic education, let alone a national key university, even the top two universities would be a sure thing. But he deliberately failed the test and took the initiative to choose an ordinary university in another province. First of all, he deliberately retaliated against his cold and ruthless father. Secondly, he didn't want to attract the attention of some people by being too dazzling, so as to avoid more suppression and conspiracy. Thirdly, he also wanted to change to an unfamiliar environment and start a new life. However, when he really stepped into the school, he found that life in college was not as good as he imagined. His fat body still made him suffer indifference and exclusion. Moreover, his classmates and roommates in the same dormitory used his fat body as a means to make everyone happy and find a sense of superiority. Nicknames such as Fat Pig, Meatball, Excavator, Meat Dumpling, and Marshal Tianpeng have always accompanied him throughout his 4 years of college life. Only the monitor of their class, the recognized school beauty by all the boys in the school, and He Tong Tong, who is known as the domineering goddess, not only cared and took care of him everywhere, but also gave him a warm nickname, Piglet. It was because of He Tongtong's care that he finally insisted on completing 4 years of college. Otherwise, with his busy early entrepreneurial period and cold and ruthless character, he would have dropped out of school long ago. It was He Tongtong's care that made him fall in love with her and devote himself to entrepreneurship, intending to confess his love to her with a successful career to make up for his body defects. However, just when he successfully acquired the winery and became a young rich man worth hundreds of millions, He Tongtong agreed to the confession of a handsome schoolboy who was a prince of love songs. Because of the inferiority complex caused by obesity, he silently chose to retreat, but the unforgettable secret love made him unwilling to leave. Therefore, he could only continue to get He Tongtong's care and concern by pretending to be pitiful, which was the real reason why He Tongtong always thought he was born in poverty. Until the day before graduation from college, He Tongtong not only decided to follow her boyfriend to start a business in the south, but also handed over her most precious things. Zhu Zhenjun was completely dead, and then used his successful and wealthy identity and money to roam among all kinds of women. It was not until this spring when he passed by this commercial street on a business trip that he accidentally saw He Tongtong standing at the door of the hotel to rest, and his unforgettable secret love was rekindled. After secretly inquiring, he knew that He Tongtong's process of starting a business in the south with her boyfriend was not smooth. In the absence of entrepreneurial funds, connections, and experience, not only did she fail 3 times in a row, but she also owed a lot of debts. In the end, the handsome boyfriend, unable to bear the failure of entrepreneurship and the poor life, chose a rich man's daughter as his wife, and embarked on the road to success in another way and reached the peak of life. And He Tongtong, who had nothing, dragged his scarred body and returned to his hometown alone to open a special fish restaurant. He Tongtong's miserable experience made Zhu Zhenjun feel distressed and heartbroken, and he also planned to help him sincerely. The key to the prosperity of a restaurant lies in the source of customers, so he directly paid for friends and employees to eat at the fish restaurant. But all those who had eaten the meal either got sick with diarrhea the next day or felt nauseous and didn't want to eat a second time. Since it was a matter of taste, he directly invited a top chef from a 5-star hotel at a high price and applied for the job as an ordinary chef. But the dishes made by the top chef not only tasted exactly the same as those made by He Tongtong, but also had diarrhea and nausea the next day. Such a weird thing made Zhu Zhenjun suspect that there might be something wrong with the feng shui of this commercial street, so he continued to spend a huge amount of money to invite a real feng shui master from Hong Kong. But after careful observation, the other party said that this commercial street was in a top feng shui treasure land, and the depressed business of the commercial street had nothing to do with feng shui. In desperation, he could only let He Tongtong leave this weird commercial street through a high transfer fee. But the kind-hearted He Tongtong was unwilling to cheat others, and he had been gritting his teeth and insisting on not transferring, which made Zhu Zhenjun completely lose the means to help him. After hearing Zhu Zhenjun's detailed explanation, Zhang Fengjai looked at him with a trace of pity in addition to admiration. After all, he was under unimaginable pressure at an age when he shouldn't have taken on any responsibilities, so any mental distortion was normal. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai would not only help He Tongtong solve the problem of business depression, but also help Zhu Zhenjun gain happiness in life. Because through the face reading just now, he knew that He Tongtong had a strong fortune to bring good luck to her husband. The reason why the man who abandoned her did not succeed was either because he was not compatible with her or because he himself was a useless person. Brother Zhu, do you want to pursue Sister Tongtong again? Hearing Zhang Fengjai directly ask the secret that he tried hard to hide, he immediately turned around and looked at the kitchen with a guilty conscience, then turned back and nodded to admit it. Yes, I do plan to pursue Tongtong again. After nodding and admitting, Zhu Zhenjun said with gratitude in his eyes. Brother, in fact, The reason why I can make this decision is thanks to the python meat and weight loss prescription you gave me, which allowed me to completely eliminate my inner inferiority. Otherwise, I would not dare to appear in front of Tong Tong, let alone actively pursue her. So, I plan to take out 10% of the company. Brother Zhu, between you and me, don't say more polite words of thanks. After reaching out to interrupt Zhu Zhenjun's words and conditions of thanks, Zhang Fengjai smiled and nodded to encourage. I have carefully examined Sister Tong Tong's face just now and found that she is not only a woman who is loyal in love, but also a good wife who can bring prosperity to her husband and manage the family. So I support you in pursuing Sister Tong Tong again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 193. Weishan Lake Fish House. Brother, thank you. If the weight loss using python meat and traditional Chinese medicine was successful, he would completely overcome his inferiority complex and make up his mind to pursue He Tong Tong. Then, the encouragement Zhang Fengjai just used to give him with his face was equivalent to giving him 100% confidence. This made Zhu Zhenjun very excited, and at the same time, he stood up and bent down to thank him. After raising his hand to signal Zhu Zhenjun to sit down, Zhang Fengjai turned his head and glanced at the commercial street outside the window, and said with a serious expression, Brother Zhu, in fact, the Feng Shui master from Xiangjiang is right. This commercial street is definitely among the top Feng Shui treasures. The reason for the sluggish business has nothing to do with Feng Shui. Brother, could it be because of demons and ghosts? Even Zhang Fengjai, who was born in a Taoist family, said that the reason for the sluggish business in the commercial street had nothing to do with Feng Shui. This made Zhu Zhenjun immediately think of the evil lowly dolls, monster pythons, and red ghosts he had seen before, and he felt uncomfortable. Think in that direction in a controlled manner. Brother Zhu, I'm not 100% sure yet whether it's related to monsters or monsters. After retracting his gaze from the commercial street, Zhang Fengjai regained his composure and said, So, after we have eaten the whole fish feast carefully prepared by Sister Tong Tong, I am going to walk around the commercial street. Okay. Zhu Zhenjun, who could not help at all, could only nod his head in agreement. Afterwards, the two of them thought about their own thoughts while waiting for He Tong Tong's full fish feast. Fortunately, there was no busy business without any customers, so He Tong Tong, a chef, did not need to be distracted, so she quickly prepared 8 kinds of fish feasts including steamed, braised, stir-fried, spicy and pickled vegetables. Xiaozu, Yezi, business hasn't been very good lately, and we haven't prepared a lot of ingredients, so we can only make some simple things, He Tong Tong explained in an apologetic tone as he placed the last dish of pickled fish on the table. Sister Tong Tong, this is already very rich, Zhang Fengjai said politely as he quickly stood up while looking at the fish feast that was almost full on the table. It's been almost 10 years since I've tasted Tong Tong's delicious food. I must enjoy it today. Zhu Zhenjun, who was not polite to He Tong Tong at all, picked up his chopsticks and pointed them directly at the fragrant braised fish. However, just when his chopsticks were about to touch the fish, Zhang Fengjai suddenly stretched out his chopsticks and accurately flicked Zhu Zhenjun's chopsticks away. While ordering with a smile, he secretly winked at him. As the saying goes, if you drink fresh fish with white sprinkles, the more you drink, the richer you will be. Brother Zhu, I remember that you seem to have a few bottles of 20-year-old national wine in your car. How about taking them out and sharing them with everyone? Look at my stupid brain. I forgot such an important thing. I'm going to get it now. After getting Zhang Fengjai's secret look, Zhu Zhenjun slapped his forehead in anger and blamed himself, then quickly stood up and left the fish restaurant to get some wine. Zhang Fengjai, while He Tong Tong was not paying attention, quietly opened his eyes to observe the 8 dishes, and found that the seemingly fresh fish was rotting and deteriorating rapidly. Moreover, depending on the speed of decay and deterioration, you are guaranteed not to notice anything unusual before you finish enjoying it. No wonder all the guests who had eaten the fish feast would have nausea and diarrhea afterwards. Anyone who ate this kind of fish that can rot and deteriorate quickly would probably fall ill. Seeing that He Tongtong's attention was always on Zhu Zhenjun, Zhang Fengjai quietly formed a magic formula with his right hand placed under the table, and then integrated the evil-breaking spell condensed from the magic formula into the dishes across the table. What happened next was completely beyond his expectation. Because of the 8 dishes incorporating the evil-breaking curse, the rate at which the meat rots and deteriorates is increased at least several times, and at the same time, the fragrance emitted by the fish becomes even more intense and attractive. Tong Tong, I didn't expect that after so many years, your cooking skills are getting better and better. Zhu Zhenjun, who returned to the fish restaurant with 2 bottles of liquor in his arms, was immediately attracted by the rich smell of fish meat. He sighed repeatedly and returned to his seat. He Tongtong looked at the 8 dishes on the table with a puzzled look in his eyes. Because the aroma of the 8-course fish feast when it was cooked just now was not as strong as it is now. Brother Zhu, let me do it. Reaching out to grab the liquor that Zhu Zhenjun was about to open, Zhang Fengjai opened the liquor box while looking at He Tongtong, whose eyes were full of doubts. In response, Zhu Zhenjun picked up his chopsticks without objection and directly peeled open the belly of the braised fish, intending to enjoy the meat with the best taste and the least fish bones. But the moment the chopsticks were inserted into the belly of the fish, a white liquid of rotten flesh immediately flowed out. At the same time, a pungent odor immediately filled the entire fish house, causing Zhu Zhenjun to turn around and vomit. It also made He Tongtong's face instantly pale, and the look of doubt in his eyes became even thicker. Seeing that the doubtful look in He Tongtong's eyes was not deliberately pretending, Zhang Fengjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Brother, what on earth is going on? After suppressing the nausea and vomiting in his body, Zhu Zhenjun looked at the pale He Tongtong and asked, pinching his nose with some distress. Without answering Zhu Zhenjun's question for the time being, Zhang Fengjai used his spiritual power to seal his sense of smell, then picked up his chopsticks and peeled open the remaining 3 whole fish of steamed, oiled, and pickled vegetables, and then the same flow of water flowed from the belly of the 3 whole fishes. A white liquid with a strong odor. Impossible, these fish are obviously fresh fish delivered this morning, how could they deteriorate and stink in such a short period of time? He Tongtong stood up suddenly, shook his head in disbelief and retorted to himself, then turned around and went straight to the kitchen in the hall. Brother Zhu, let's go take a look too, Zhang Fengjai, who also stood up, reminded Zhu Zhenjun, who was pinching his nose hard. Go around the counter in the hall, lift a beaded curtain, and come to the kitchen with an area of more than 20 square meters. At this time, He Tongtong was grabbing a lively carp from the pool, holding a knife and preparing to disembowel it for inspection. In response, Zhang Fengjai did not stop him. Instead, he used his eyes that were always open to observe the remaining dozen or so live fish in the pool. Looking at the fish swimming back and forth in the pool, they seemed to be very fresh and live fish. However, under the gaze of the heavenly eye, the fish in the pool have long since died. They are only alive under the control of a faint trace of evil spirit. Gives people a fresh feeling of being alive. Isn't this a very fresh fish? He Tongtong frowned and said to himself as he looked at the disemboweled carp. Not only were the internal organs fresh, but the blood of the crucian carp dyed the water in the basin red. Road. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 194. Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant. Seeing the fresh live fish dissected by He Tongtong, and thinking of the rotten dead fish that were used as fish feasts just now, Zhu Zhenjun asked with a gloomy face. Brother, what is going on? In response, Zhang Fengjai did not give any response, and formed a spell with his hands, and then printed the condensed evil breaking spell in the pool and on the carp dissected by He Tong Tong. The dozen live fish that were originally swimming in the pool, under the control of the demon spirit, all floated on the clear water with their white bellies turned upside down. The carp dissected on He Tong Tong's chopping board, under the cover of the demon spirit, immediately turned its internal organs and blood into a white liquid with a pungent stench, which immediately made the whole kitchen stink. As a chef in a fish restaurant, although He Tong Tong had long been accustomed to some disgusting scenes, when he saw the white liquid with a pungent stench on the chopping board, he still couldn't control his stomach and turned his head to vomit. "Brother Zhu, you accompany Sister Tong Tong to clean up the kitchen first." The demonic energy that the Sky Eye had been watching, after breaking away from the dozen dead fish it was controlling, floated directly to the back of the fish restaurant through the open window above its head. Without the slightest hesitation, Zhang Fengjai gave Zhu Zhenjun a warning, then flew into the air and chased him out through the window. "Zhu, who is Ye Zi? What's the matter with these dead fish?" The vertical height of the kitchen window from the ground is nearly 2.2 meters. Zhang Fengjai can jump to the windowsill with a light jump, which is more powerful than those high jump champions in the Olympics. At the same time, just pointing 10 fingers at the pool and the chopping board, the dozen live fish in the pool became dead fish, and the dead fish on the chopping board became smelly fish, which made He Tong Tong immediately realize Zhang Fengjai's extraordinariness. "Tong Tong, after cleaning up these dead and stinky fish, I will explain to you in detail the origin of Brother Ye and the real reason for the decline of the fish restaurant business." Zhu Zhenjun bent down to pick up the trash can at the door, and used a clamp net to pick up the dead fish in the pool while reminding He Tong Tong. In this regard, He Tong Tong could only temporarily suppress his doubts and clean up the dead and stinky fish in the kitchen with Zhu Zhenjun. After jumping off the kitchen windowsill, Zhang Fengjai found that behind the fish restaurant was a river with a width of nearly 20 meters. One end of the river connected to the city, and the other end led directly to the Tangkao coal mine. Based on the feng shui observation of the commercial street just now, he knew that the river behind the fish restaurant was called King He, which was a small tributary of the Grand Canal. Seeing the demon spirit controlling more than a dozen dead fish quickly drifting towards King He, Zhang Fengjai chased after it without much delay. However, when he chased to the riverside of King He, he found that the demon spirit controlling the dead fish directly entered the river. Although the water of King He River was very clear and the river was not very fast, it hindered the further tracking of Tianyan, which made Zhang Fengjai frown. However, considering the small number of demonic energy, it was not very powerful and it was difficult to return to the body of the demon beast upstream, so he directly followed the direction of the river and continued to track along the river bank. About less than 500 meters ahead, the river channel of King He River not only began to become loose, but also blocked two wire meshes of different thicknesses in the middle of the river. After crossing the two wire meshes less than 10 meters apart, Zhang Fengjai saw more than a dozen people standing, sitting, or squatting on both sides of the river bank, fishing. At the same time, about 60 to 70 meters ahead, the river channel narrowed again, and two wire meshes of different thicknesses were also blocked. Moreover, judging from the thick limestone and cement steps on both sides of the river channel where the river channel widened, the changes in the expansion of the river channel were artificially modified. The reason for the river course transformation is probably to raise fish with the living water of King He River. Although he admired the fish farmer's methods, Zhang Fengjai, who was eager to track down the source of the evil spirit, did not pay much attention to it. He bypassed the fisherman in front of him and planned to continue to go deeper along the river bank. However, just when he bypassed a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 30s, slim and pretty, she suddenly pulled up the fishing rod and shouted in surprise, "It's hooked!" Zhang Fengjai turned his head subconsciously and was stunned. In order to track the source of the evil spirit, he had been using his spiritual energy to open his eyes, so he saw that the carp hooked by the beautiful woman had a very weak evil spirit hidden in its body, and that trace of evil spirit began to forcibly crush the carp's vitality. It seemed to be struggling desperately to get rid of the fishhook, but under the control of the evil spirit, the carp weighing nearly 5 pounds was easily thrown to the concrete ground on the shore by the beautiful woman. Picking up the carp that fell on the cement ground on the shore, the beautiful woman happily threw the fish into the bucket, and then continued to sit there quietly fishing. Looking at the carp swimming in the bucket, and then looking at the beautiful woman who had calmed down again, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help frowning. Because at the moment when the beautiful woman picked up the carp, half of the demonic energy in the carp's body suddenly merged into the beautiful woman's body. Demonic energy is a source of energy for demon beasts to enhance their strength and a panacea to prolong their lifespan, but for humans with fragile constitutions, demonic energy is a deadly poison. While secretly mobilizing spiritual power to input into his eyes and enhancing the power of the heavenly eye, he began to observe the beautiful woman again. Then, he couldn't help but take a breath. Because he found that the beautiful woman's internal organs had been corroded by the demonic energy by nearly half. The reason why she was still alive and well was that the demonic energy accumulated in her body provided the energy she needed for life. However, if the amount of demonic energy continued to accumulate, the beautiful woman would soon become a monster that was neither human nor demon. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai hurriedly used his sky eye to observe other people who were fishing, and found that their conditions were exactly the same as the beautiful woman. There was even an old man with a more serious condition. All his organs were replaced by demonic energy, and it would take only 1 to 2 days for him to become a monster. After taking a deep breath and suppressing the shock that emerged in his body, Zhang Fengjai squatted directly beside the beautiful woman, staring at the unknown depth of the Qinghe River, and whispered to her, "Beautiful sister, are there many fish here? Is it easy to hook?" Although fishing requires an absolutely quiet environment, Zhang Fengjai's words just now made the beautiful woman feel comfortable and explained patiently. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 195. The village about 3 miles away from the renovated riverbank is called Zhangqiao Village, which is the most populous and economically developed administrative natural village in Tangkao Town. 2 large auto repair shops, a medium-sized glass manufacturing plant, and the entire commercial street are all industries belonging to Zhangqiao Village. Even the state-owned Tangkao coal mine, nearly half of the mining area occupies the arable land of Zhangqiao Village, and a large amount of compensation needs to be given to the village committee every year. The registered population of Zhangqiao Village is nearly 8,000, and nearly 2/3 of the villagers are surnamed Zhang. Therefore, the secretary, village director and women's director of each election are all members of the Zhang family, which has cultivated the overbearing and lawless style of the village committee leaders. According to national regulations, no person or department is qualified to arbitrarily renovate and operate rivers and arable land that are related to people's livelihood. However, the village committee of Zhangqiao Village ignored the laws and regulations and forcibly renovated the Qinghe River, a tributary used to dredge the water of the Grand Canal, and used it as a private fish pond for profit. Due to the clear water quality of Qinghe River and the large amount of fish fry and feed released by the Zhangqiao Village Committee, the transformed river bank not only has a large number of fish, but also large fish. After hearing the beautiful woman's introduction, Zhang Fengjai suddenly felt a bad feeling in his heart and asked, "Beautiful sister, do many people come here to fish?" "Not many." The beautiful woman suddenly pulled up the fishing rod and put the second carp she caught in the bucket, saying with a little arrogance, "Because this section of the river bank belongs to our Zhangqiao village, no one except the villagers of Zhangqiao village is allowed to come here to fish. There are fewer people who come here to fish, so there are fewer people who are harmed by the evil spirit." This made Zhang Fengjai secretly relieved, and he began to carefully observe this section of the transformed river bank, trying to find the source of the evil spirit that gave the fish. But unfortunately, the bottomless river water and the debris blocked by the iron net made him unable to see anything at the bottom of the river, and he could only give up the idea of looking for it helplessly. Afterwards, he stood up and prepared to return to the fish house, intending to go and see He Tong Tong, who often dealt with fish, to see if she had been harmed by the demonic energy. However, just as he turned around, the old man who was most seriously harmed by the demonic energy suddenly pulled the fishing rod hard, and then shouted loudly with a red face, "Come and help, I think I hooked a big one." After hearing the old man's call, the 7 young men and middle-aged men on this side of the river immediately put down their fishing rods and ran over to help. The more fish you hook, the thicker the demonic energy you are contaminated with, and the closer you are to becoming a monster. After looking at the old man with pity in his eyes, Zhang Fengjai had no intention of staying to help, and continued to walk away. Bang! But just as he walked to the position of the first iron net, the sound of a broken fishing line suddenly came from behind him. Then, a sound of breaking air with violent friction with the air was quickly pulled towards him. Without any hesitation, Zhang Fengjai immediately performed a carp rolling move to avoid the broken fishing line that was pulled quickly, and then watched the fishing line turn around and hit the old man. Puff! Puff! The old man who was hit by the fishing line directly, his whole body was cut in half, and the 2 halves of his body fell directly into the river, and then sank to the bottom of the river without even a bubble. According to the strength of the broken fishing line, the direction of the whipping, and the residual demonic energy, Zhang Fengjai knew that the big guy the old man had hooked just now was probably a demon beast that gave fish demonic energy. The reason why the other party suddenly attacked was probably because he sensed the prying of the sky eye just now, or he didn't want the old man who was about to be completely occupied by the demonic energy to become a monster that was neither human nor demon, and finally attracted the attention of the country. Looking at the 2 halves of the body that fell into the river, more than a dozen people on both sides of the river were completely stunned. The beautiful woman who waited until the fishing rod in her hand suddenly trembled, and suddenly woke up, immediately gave instructions to the people on the other side of the river. "Quick, go and inform the branch secretary, tell him that his father was pulled into the river by the broken fishing line." Then, the beautiful woman shouted loudly to the people who had just helped pull the fishing rod. "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and go down to the river to look for the body." After hearing the beautiful woman's order, the 7 young men and middle-aged men who had just helped took off their clothes with helpless expressions, and then jumped into the river one after another. In response, Zhang Fengjai neither stopped them nor warned them. Because the 7 people who had just jumped into the river, even if they were not killed by the monsters in the river, their internal organs had been completely corroded by the monster's aura, and they would not live for too long. Flashing to the river bank, he mobilized his spiritual power to reopen his eyes, and then carefully observed the changes in the river water. Help! Just as Zhang Fengjai was paying full attention to the changes in the river water, a young man who had just sunk to the bottom of the river suddenly struggled desperately and popped his head out, and then shouted for help. His eyes immediately shifted to the young man who was calling for help. The sky eye immediately saw a wire controlled by demonic power, tightly wrapped around the young man's legs, and then pulled down with force. His eyes quickly swept around, and immediately locked onto several fishing rods thrown on the shore. He flashed in front of a fishing rod, picked it up, and threw it directly to the beautiful woman, and shouted, "Use the fishing rod to pull the other person." Then, he picked up another fishing rod and broke it directly. According to the vertical direction of the wire, he then shot the fishing rod with spiritual power into the river bottom. In less than 3 seconds, the demonic power on the wire suddenly disappeared, and the struggling young man was rescued safely. In less than 5 seconds, a large amount of blood floated out from the bottom of the river, indicating that the fishing rod with spiritual power had pierced the demon beast at the bottom of the river. Whether it was the young man who was almost dragged to the bottom of the river just now, or the river water that had been dyed red with blood, it showed that the bottom of the river was very dangerous, so the remaining 6 young men and the middle-aged man swam desperately to the shore. Just as the last middle-aged man reached out to grab the protruding steps and was about to step on the steps to leave the river, a huge carp with a body length of nearly 10 meters and a fishing rod stuck in its body suddenly jumped out from the river behind him. After the huge carp opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the middle-aged man directly into its mouth, it glared at Zhang Fengjai with hatred, and then quickly sank into the water to leave. Anyway, these people on the river bank will soon die from the corrosion of demonic energy, and there is no need to worry about them revealing their identities as cultivators. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai mobilized his spiritual power to quickly condense a sharp sword, and directly used the magic spell to control the sword to stab the fish monster. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 196. The sky and the earth are boundless, Qian sword technique. Accompanied by Zhang Fengjai's roar, the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power immediately turned into a white light and shot directly into the river. Afterwards, the river water with ripples suddenly churned up. Immediately afterwards, the fish monster that had just sunk to the bottom of the river rushed out of the water again, and then opened its mouth and spit out a sharp water arrow. Break it for me. Quickly mobilizing spiritual power and the strength of the steel-like body, Zhang Fengjai used the spell and incantation to call back the sharp sword that hit the fish monster. The sky and the earth are boundless, the spiritual sword returns to the sheath. After the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power returned to his hand, Zhang Fengjai performed the Qingfeng step and stepped on the river water, and rushed directly to the back of the fish monster. Enduring the pain caused by the piercing of the fishing rod and the sharp sword, the fish monster shook his body vigorously, hoping to shake the human standing on his back off. But unfortunately, when Zhang Fengjai jumped to the back of the fish monster, he had already used his right hand to tightly hold a piece of fish scale on the back. No matter how hard the fish monster shook and swung, he could not easily throw him off. Puff, puff, puff. At the same time, the left hand holding the sword began to stab the fish monster's back with spiritual power. Perhaps because he was stabbed by the sword many times, or perhaps because he was completely numb to the pain in his body, the fish monster, who gradually calmed down from anger, soon found that he had made a fatal mistake, or gave up his greatest advantage, that is, his water ability. Immediately stopped shaking his body, and the fish monster began to sink rapidly to the bottom of the river. The resistance formed by the river water not only affected his speed, but also weakened the power of spiritual power. So, when he saw the fish monster sinking rapidly to the bottom of the river, Zhang Fengjai slashed a sword energy at the vital point of the fish monster's head, and immediately performed the Qingfeng step to return to the river bank. At this time, several young men and middle-aged men on the river bank looked at Zhang Fengjai with awe. At this moment, the beautiful woman's face was slightly blushing, her slender legs were tightly clamped, and there was a hint of emotion in her eyes when she looked at him. Ignoring the eyes of the people on the river bank, Zhang Fengjai stared at the river surface with a sword in his hand, with a look of expectation in his eyes. Because when he got away from the back of the fish monster, he used all his strength to directly cut the vital part of the fish monster's head. Even if it couldn't take its life directly, it was enough to make it suffer heavy damage and unable to control its huge body to resurface. But to his surprise, after waiting for nearly 3 minutes, the fish monster's body did not float to the surface, and the few people on the river bank who were occupied by the demonic energy did not get into trouble, which replaced the look of expectation in his eyes with disappointment. However, when he saw the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power and the fish monster's blood on his right palm, he immediately had a way to kill the fish monster. Without any delay, he took out 3 blank talisman papers from his sleeves and prepared to use the fish monster's blood to draw talismans. But at this moment, there were chaotic footsteps and voices on the other side of Qinghe River, which made Zhang Fengjai frown. Looking up, villagers with bare chests, ropes, or lifebuoys kept appearing in the cornfield on the other side of the river. Drawing talismans that can transform requires a relatively quiet environment. Casting talismans to condense fish monsters requires an absolutely confidential environment for the time being. So, when he saw the villagers appearing on the river bank, Zhang Fengjai quickly put away the 3 blank talisman papers, as well as the fish monster's blood on his palm and sword, and then turned around and returned to the fish house along the river bank. Although the beautiful woman wanted to follow him, when she saw the fierce-looking middle-aged man in a plaid shirt appearing on the other side of the river, a trace of fear flashed in her eyes, making her stand obediently on the shore. Following the river bank back to the back of the fish restaurant, and then entering the kitchen through the window, Zhang Fengjai lifted the door curtain and planned to enter the hall, but found that Zhu Zhenjun was holding He Tongtong's hands tightly and confessing, so he immediately retreated to the kitchen. Then, he took out the talisman paper and the fish monster's blood that he had just put away, drew 3 talismans that could transform, and walked back to the door curtain to eavesdrop. But unfortunately, under the fierce attack of Zhu Zhenjun, a veteran in the love field, He Tongtong did not hold on for long before being conquered, which made Zhang Fengjai miss the opportunity to watch the show and learn. Cough. After coughing hard to remind Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong in the hall to pay attention, Zhang Fengjai lifted the door curtain and left the kitchen, while using spiritual power to open the sky eye again. "Brother, you're back." Seeing Zhang Fengjai appearing in the hall, He Tongtong immediately lowered his head with a blushing face, while Zhu Zhenjun, who was as thick-skinned as a city wall, greeted him triumphantly. After nodding to Zhu Zhenjun, Zhang Fengjai's face gradually became solemn. Because he found that the amount of demonic energy accumulated in He Tongtong's body was not inferior to that of the beautiful woman on the river bank. In other words, He Tongtong's internal organs had been corroded by the demonic energy of the fish demon by nearly half, and both feet had stepped into the gates of hell. "Brother, what's wrong?" Seeing Zhang Fengjai staring at He Tongtong, his face gradually became solemn, and Zhu Zhenjun, who suddenly felt a little bad in his heart, hurriedly asked. After signaling Zhu Zhenjun not to worry for the time being, Zhang Fengjai walked directly in front of He Tongtong and gave him instructions. "Sister Tongtong, please extend your right hand." When Zhang Fengjai left the fish restaurant, she had heard Zhu Zhenjun's detailed introduction to Zhang Fengjai's origins and knew that he was a Taoist monk with great magical powers, so He Tongtong extended her right hand without hesitation. Putting his index and middle fingers on her wrist, and using the method of Chinese medicine to check her internal condition, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sighed. "Brother, is Tongtong in trouble?" The solemn expression not only did not ease, but also sighed very heavily, which made Zhu Zhenjun immediately realize that He Tongtong must have encountered a very difficult problem. Walking to the table where they had just eaten, and motioning Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong to sit down, Zhang Fengjai closed his eyes and began to think about how to remove the evil spirit in He Tongtong's body while restoring her corroded internal organs. However, he thought about all the skills taught to him by his great-grandfather and third-grandfather, and he couldn't think of a way to save He Tongtong. In the end, he could only open his eyes and tell the truth. However, just as he was about to reveal the trouble He Tongtong had encountered, He Tongtong, who was touching his stomach, asked with a look of desire in his eyes. "Yezi, did you bring something delicious with you? Why does it smell so good?" The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 197. Hushanhu Fish Restaurant. Seeing He Tongtong interrupt what Zhang Fengjai was about to say, Zhu Zhenjun, who was anxious to know the details, criticized with an unhappy look. "Tongtong, listen to my brother first." "You shut up too." But as soon as Zhu Zhenjun finished criticizing, Zhang Fengjai also frowned and scolded. Then, he asked with a hint of expectation in his eyes. "Sister Tongtong, can you describe what kind of fragrance it is?" "I can't say what kind of fragrance it is," It's the kind of fragrance that makes me unable to control my inner impulse and want to get it, He Tongtong explained with a slight frown. There was no such indescribable fragrance when they first met, and it was only after he came back from a stroll on the river bank. This made Zhang Fengjai immediately guess what the fragrance that neither he nor Zhu Zhenjun smelled was. He took out a talisman that he had just drawn with the blood of the fish demon from his sleeve, and then shook it in front of He Tongtong's eyes. Then, he saw the other party's clear eyes immediately turn scarlet, and his emotions immediately became excited. "Brother Ye, give it to me quickly." Unable to control the strong desire that emerged in his heart, He Tongtong took the initiative to ask for it, and directly stretched out his hand to grab the talisman, but was taken away by Zhang Fengjai one step ahead. Then, he quickly tapped He Tongtong's right shoulder with his right hand finger, causing her outstretched right arm to be directly fixed in mid-air, and then used the pulse-cutting technique with the sky eye to re-observe the situation in her body. Then, he found that the originally calm demonic energy in He Tongtong's body not only boiled, but also released a little life essence, which made her corroded internal organs in her body show a trend of rapid growth and recovery. After untying the fixed arm again, Zhang Fengjai breathed a sigh of relief, and his fingers quickly tapped the table and fell into deep thought. Zhu Zhenjun reached out and held He Tongtong's shoulders tightly, asking her to be quiet and not disturb Zhang Fengjai. Through the spell test just now, Zhang Fengjai knew that the reason for the boiling of demonic energy came from the blood of the fish demon that drew the spell. At the same time, through the changes between the demonic energy and the internal organs in her body, he knew that the key to saving her was also the blood of the fish demon. But the only trouble was that He Tongtong, whose internal organs were severely corroded by the demonic energy, had formed a life and death relationship with the fish demon, because the demonic energy that maintained her vitality came from the fish demon. Once the fish demon died, the demonic energy dissipated immediately. Unless before killing the fish demon at the bottom of Qinghe River, the blood of the fish demon was used in advance to restore her internal organs. But this required him to completely confess everything to He Tongtong and Zhu Zhenjun before he killed the fish demon. First, he needed to take He Tongtong to the transformed river bank so that before the fish demon was completely killed, she could take the fish demon blood that could restore her internal organs in time to ensure that she would not die because of the loss of demonic energy. Secondly, he also needed He Tongtong to prepare himself in advance, so that he would not lose his temper at the critical moment due to nausea and vomiting, which would eventually affect his action of killing the fish monster. After making up his mind, Zhang Fengjai took a deep breath, and then told Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong the real reason for the depression of the business street, the existence of the fish monster, and the harm caused by the demonic energy. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's detailed account, Zhu Zhenjun's breathing gradually became heavier with his fists clenched, and the flames of anger ignited in his eyes. Because he did not expect that his lover, who had been tortured in love and life, would also suffer such cruel harm. He Tongtong frowned tightly, and a look of doubt appeared in his eyes. After all, a fish monster like the one who had cultivated successfully was in existence in folk legends, and the demonic energy corroding the internal organs in his body sounded more like nonsense. Ignoring the angry Zhu Zhenjun, facing He Tongtong with doubts in his eyes, Zhang Fengjai turned his head and looked at the empty commercial street. After making sure that no one would notice the movement in the fish house, he directly took out the talisman paper that had just caused the change in the demonic energy in the other party's body, and then used spiritual power to drive the talisman. As the talisman condensed into a huge carp with a body length of nearly 10 meters, He Tongtong hid in Zhu Zhenjun's arms with a look of fear. The flames of anger burning in Zhu Zhenjun's eyes were immediately replaced by helplessness. After all, as an ordinary person, let alone revenge for his beloved woman, he probably didn't even have the courage and ability to stand in front of the fish demon. After using the spell to disperse the condensed fish demon and taking back the talisman that did not consume too much energy, Zhang Fengjai looked directly into He Tongtong's eyes and asked, "Sister Tongtong, I wonder if you believe in the existence of fish demons now?" "Believe?" I believe, he Tong Tong, who still had a look of fear in his eyes, nodded quickly. Because the largest carp known in the world is a Benson carp that weighs only 58 kilograms and is only more than 1 meter long. The carp that Zhang Fengjai had just conjured up with the spell was not only nearly 10 meters long, but also weighed more than 1,000 kilograms, which was completely beyond the growth limit of the carp. This made her believe in the real existence of the fish monster. Brother Zhu, sister Tong Tong, you guys make some preparations. We will act immediately after dark. After seeing He Tong Tong finally accept the fact that the fish monster existed, Zhang Fengjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Got it?" After nodding his head in agreement, Zhu Zhenjun raised his wrist to check the time and found that it was already past 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then he threw the car keys in front of He Tong Tong and ordered, "Tong Tong, drive my car to Fuyuan Seafood Restaurant and ask them to send a whole fish feast made entirely of carp. We can work after we are full and satisfied." "I know." After reaching out to pick up the car keys on the table, He Tong Tong apologized to Zhang Fengjai, then got up and left the fish restaurant, started the sports car, and slowly drove away from the commercial street. "Brother, are you sure that after killing the fish monster at the bottom of Qinghe River, there will be a large number of deaths among the villagers of Zhangqiao village?" After He Tong Tong drove the sports car away from the commercial street, Zhu Zhenjun chased with a hint of excitement in his eyes. "I am very sure." Thinking of the beautiful woman on the river bank, Zhang Fengjai nodded in affirmation and added further to the introduction of people who like to hook fish. Moreover, those who died in Zhangqiao village were either cotters of the village committee or wealthy people in the village. After all, for farmers who are busy all year round, only those who are rich and powerful can have the leisure to go fishing. Because fishing is an activity that consumes a lot of time and energy. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 198. Hushanhu Fish House. After receiving Zhang Fengjai's affirmative answer, Zhu Zhenjun's eyes flashed with a gleam, and then he began to quietly calculate numbers, investment, coordination, installments, profits, and other things that he didn't understand at all. At the same time, he would call some people from time to time, either to ask some very obscure things, or to arrange some people to hurry over. In this regard, Zhang Fengjai felt very bored, and he closed his eyes and began to think about the plan to kill the monster after dark instead of paying attention to Zhu Zhenjun. It was not until the Bugatti Veyron sports car and a 7-seater commercial vehicle stopped in front of the fish house that Zhu Zhenjun ended his busy self-talking, and reminded He Tong Tong when he entered the fish house. "Brother, in 5 days at the shortest and 7 days at the longest, I will give you an unexpected mysterious gift." Originally wanted to refuse the mysterious gift prepared by Zhu Zhenjun, but the other party did not give him the opportunity to refuse, and directly got up and left the fish house to greet He Tong Tong, which made Zhang Fengjai only smile bitterly and shook his head. Although Fuyuan Seafood Restaurant is one of the most upscale restaurants in Ningji City, with several top chefs in charge, when faced with a single ingredient requirement, they only made a full fish feast of 16 dishes. However, although there are not many styles of dishes, the cooking skills of the top chefs are very outstanding. Not only is the color of each dish bright and delicate, but the taste is also endless aftertaste, which also allows Zhang Fengjai to taste real food for the first time. Therefore, almost 2/3 of the 16 dishes of the full fish feast were consumed by him. After a loud burp, Zhang Fengjai touched his slightly propped up skin, and looked at He Tong Tong and Zhu Zhenjun, who got up to clean up the leftovers, with envy and yearning in his eyes. Because of his own practice of Taoism, although he has been following the arrogant third grandfather for a long time, he is similar to his great-grandfather in character. They both have a kind of indifference to the world and yearn for a quiet and peaceful pastoral life. However, without experiencing the trials of the secular world, it is impossible to improve the cultivation of Taoism. The 5 disadvantages and 3 deficiencies are transferred to the dilemma of wealth, and the leisurely and comfortable rural life cannot be guaranteed. Therefore, he had to leave the Taoist temple and enter the city to experience and struggle. Influenced by the loving scenes of Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, Zhang Fengjai decided to wait until he accumulated enough wealth and his Taoist cultivation could be as divine as his third grandfather, then he would take Sulitzi back to Zhang village in Shushan to live in seclusion, and then spend the rest of his life peacefully. With the arrival of night and the rise of the full moon, Zhang Fengjai brought Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong to the expanded and renovated river bank. At this time, the villagers who came to salvage the body of the village party secretary's father had returned home, and there was no sound in the surrounding cornfields. At this moment, the clear light of the full moon made the clear flowing river water appear layers of silver, presenting a beautiful and magnificent scenery. Brother Zhu, Sister Tong Tong, you stay here for now. 5 meters away from the remodeled river bank, Zhang Fengjai stopped and gave Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong a warning, then quickened his pace to the river bank, and then mobilized his spiritual power to condense a sharp sword while provoking the fish monster at the bottom of the river. Little fish monster, you are so bold and reckless, bloodthirsty, killing innocent people, and offending the majesty of heaven, why don't you come out and die quickly? Faced with Zhang Fengjai's extremely arrogant provocation, the calm river surface did not move, and the fish monster at the bottom of the river did not give any response. In response, Zhang Fengjai did not care at all and began to humiliate. Little fish demon, it seems that you are also a softy who only knows how to bully the weak and fear the strong, and only dares to show off in front of ordinary mortals. Now that I have seen a real strong man, I can only hide in the riverbed forever like your fellow turtles, and be a pitiful turtle for the rest of my life. Puff. After the fish demon was promoted to a demon beast, although it has a certain wisdom and can clearly judge the danger of the situation, the instinct of the demon beast's violent impulse will not disappear. Therefore, in the face of Zhang Fengjai's humiliation, a water arrow suddenly shot out from the calm river surface. Using the sharp sword in his hand to directly disperse the water arrow, and through the demon power contained in the water arrow, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a look of surprise after concluding that the fish demon not only did not recover from the severe injury he suffered in the afternoon, but now can only exert half of his strength. Then, he took out the talisman drawn with the blood of the fish demon from his sleeve, and used spiritual power to drive the talisman to begin to transform. After the talisman paper thrown into the air turned into a fish monster, Zhang Fengjai used his mind to control the fish monster to sink to the bottom of the river. It didn't take long before the calm river surface suddenly began to churn violently. As the river water churned more and more violently, 2 identical fish monsters gradually surfaced after fighting each other. One of the fish monsters was not only scarred, but also had a sword wound on its head that almost split half of its head. Since the talisman was only drawn with the ordinary blood of the fish monster condensed by the talisman could only exert 1/3 of its original strength. Therefore, facing the fish monster that could still exert half of its strength, the fish monster condensed by the talisman was completely at a disadvantage. The sky and the earth are boundless, Qiankan swordsmanship. Seeing that the fish monster condensed by the talisman was not only completely at a disadvantage, but also in danger of being broken at any time, Zhang Fengjai did not delay too much, pinched the magic formula to control the sword, and directly stabbed the fish monster's eyes, which were fatal. Feeling the terrifying killing power contained in the sword that was stabbing at him quickly, the fish demon flashed a look of fear in his eyes, and he waved his huge fish tail to directly pull away the fish demon condensed by the talisman, then narrowly avoided the sword and quickly sank to the bottom of the river. Cunning guy. Seeing the fish demon hiding in the riverbed again, Zhang Fengjai cursed inwardly, took out the second talisman that could transform from his sleeve, and then used his spiritual power to drive the talisman to condense a fish demon. Then, he used his mind to control 2 identical fish demons to enter the bottom of the river. Whether it was Zhang Fengjai who used his mind to control the talisman to condense 2 fish demons, or Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong who held their breath and looked at the river surface, they did not notice the sexy and beautiful woman who was hiding in the cornfield behind them. Seeing the thin boy who could transform into a fish demon by throwing a piece of paper, and the handsome boy who could easily repel the fish demon by swinging a sword, the beautiful woman's eyes gradually ignited with uncontrollable passion. Besieged by the fish demons condensed by the two spells, the fish demon hiding deep in the river was forced to leave its habitat, but it used its strength to suppress its opponent and refused to leave the riverbed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan-Yun Yuchi. Chapter 199. After the fish demon gathered through the talisman learned the specific situation at the bottom of the river, a disdainful sneer flashed in Zhang Fenjai's eyes, and then he took out the third transformed talisman from his sleeve. Then, he used his spiritual power to drive the third fish demon condensed by the talisman, and sank directly to the bottom of the river to participate in the siege. In the end, under the siege of the fish demon condensed by three talismans, the fish demon, which no longer had any advantage, was forced to leave the bottom of the river. Heaven and earth are infinite, Kin sword technique. Just as the fish demon's huge body surfaced, Zhang Fenjai used magic to control the sword to attack. In the end, the sharp sword directly pierced the fish demon's breathing gills, causing it to suffer fatal injuries in an instant. At the same time, the three fish demons condensed by the talisman worked together to knock it flying to the river bank. If the fish demon in the river was a dragon, then the fish demon that was knocked onto the river bank was worse than a worm. The spiritual power combined with the speed of Qingfeng's step allowed Zhang Fenjai to dodge and rush in front of the fish demon, and then combined his fist with the physical strength of steel and iron bones to hit the fish's head hard, and finally knocked the fish demon out. Using a sharp sword to cut open the fish demon's abdomen, and letting the blood flow, Zhang Fenjai quickly greeted He Tong Tong, who was 10 meters away. "Sister Tong Tong, come here quickly." After hearing Zhang Fenjai's greeting, Zhu Zhenjun immediately pulled He Tong Tong and ran to the fish demon. He used the iron basin prepared in advance to collect a full basin of the fish demon's blood, and then handed it directly to He Tong Tong and gave instructions. Road. Tong Tong, drink quickly. The demonic energy in his body yearned for the fish demon's blood. He Tong Tong didn't need Zhu Zhenjun's instructions at all. He Tong Tong directly grabbed the iron basin and drank it in big gulps. At the same time, Zhang Fenjai opened his eyes and began to observe the situation in her body, and found that the fish demon blood that He Tong Tong drank into her stomach quickly merged with the demon energy, and then transformed into a large amount of pure life essence. Immediately afterwards, the life essence not only quickly restored the corroded internal organs, but also strengthened her blood vessels and meridians, giving the originally weak He Tong Tong the potential to hit the top masters of the inner family in a short period of time. Brother Zhu, don't worry. Sister Tong Tong is completely safe. After retracting his eyes from He Tong Tong, Zhang Fenjai smiled and comforted when he saw Zhu Zhenjun, who looked nervous. That's good, that's good. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's relief, Zhu Zhenjun patted his chest hard and let out a long sigh of relief. Now that He Tong Tong is completely safe, there is no need to keep the fish demon around. At the same time, he was also worried about something unexpected happening to Yechangmenduo, so when Zhang Fenjai was holding a sharp sword and preparing to send the fish demon to hell, a slight rubbing sound suddenly sounded in his ears. Without any hesitation, he immediately mobilized his spiritual power, then turned to the cornfield with a sharp expression and asked, "Who is hiding inside?" "It's me." The beautiful woman, whose legs were a little numb due to squatting for a long time, planned to quietly get up and move her hands and feet, but accidentally bumped into a corn leaf next to her. Originally, they just touched each other, and there was no sound, so the beautiful woman didn't take it to heart at all. But what she never expected was that the faint friction sound caused by just a slight touch could actually arouse Zhang Fenjai's alert, eventually leading to her existence being revealed. Therefore, facing Zhang Fenjai's stern questioning, the beautiful woman hurriedly signaled and walked out with a rather depressed expression. "It's you." Seeing that the person walking out of the cornfield turned out to be the beautiful woman he met on the river bank in the afternoon, Zhang Fengjai was a little surprised, and at the same time, a look of doubt flashed in his eyes. It was a dark and windy night in the wilderness, and even a grown man would feel a little scared. Why would she, a sexy and beautiful woman, appear here alone? What's more, she had witnessed the fish demon eating people in the afternoon, so how could she have the courage to return to the river bank again? Isn't she afraid that she will be eaten by the fish monster at the bottom of the river? Zhang Fengjai's sharp scolding just now also alarmed He Tong Tong, who had already drank a pot of fish demon blood. When she saw the beautiful woman walking out of the cornfield, she greeted him with the same surprise. "Director Zhang." His eyes swept over the rounded breasts under the V-shaped collar and the emotional eyes that he tried his best to conceal. Then, combined with Zhang Fengjai's reaction just now as if he knew the other party, Zhu Zhenjun's eyes flashed with a thoughtful glance, and he turned to He Tong Tong and asked. "Tong Tong, you know this beautiful beauty? Her name is Zhang Huijing, she is the women's director of Zhangqiao village." He Tong Tong nodded and introduced the beautiful woman's identity, then crawled into Zhu Zhenjun's ear and whispered a reminder. "Xiao Zhu, this woman is very special. Not only is she the mistress of the village party secretary, but she is also the person in charge of 2 auto repair shops and a commercial street. She has the power and means to speak her mind." After hearing He Tong Tong's further introduction to Zhang Huijing, a look of surprise flashed in Zhu Zhenjun's eyes, and he immediately walked to Zhang Fengjai's side and asked softly. "Brother, can you use the blood of the fish demon to save her life?" "Why?" Zhang Fengjai, who immediately frowned, asked with a puzzled expression. "Because this woman named Zhang Huijing is not only related to the mysterious gift I gave you, but also can affect Tong Tong's future happiness." Facing the explanation given by Zhu Zhenjun, Zhang Fengjai suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Because judging from Zhang Huijing's constant hammering of her legs, it shows that her legs are temporarily numb. This proves that she has been squatting in the cornfield for a long time and must have witnessed with her own eyes what he just cast the spell to transform into. 3 fish monsters. Now, facing the Supernatural Research Institute's pursuit of the whereabouts of Kunlun and Long Hushan disciples, and taking risks to rescue strangers who might reveal his secrets, he actually refuses in his heart. But Zhang Huijing's safety was actually related to He Tong Tong's future happiness, which made him unable to categorically reject Zhu Zhenjun. After all, Zhu Zhenjun is the only brother he recognizes and has the obligation to ensure his sister-in-law's future happiness. Just when Zhang Fengjai was in a dilemma of making a difficult decision, the dazed fish demon suddenly trembled a few times, which made him couldn't help but make a decision immediately with a sudden change in his face. "Brother Zhu, quickly let Zhang Huijing drink the blood of the fish demon, because in 1 to 2 minutes at most, the fish demon will die completely, and the demonic energy that keeps her alive will disappear immediately." After hearing Zhang Fengjai's reminder, Zhu Zhenjun's expression also changed slightly. He quickly grabbed the iron basin from He Tong Tong's hand, then took less than half of the basin of fish demon's blood, handed it directly to Zhang Huimei and gave instructions. "Director Zhang, if you don't want to die, drink up all the fish blood in the basin." The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 200. Although she was unwilling to touch the dirty iron basin and fish blood, the strong desire of the demonic energy in her body for the fish demon's blood made Zhang Huijing unable to control her instinct to take the iron basin and drink it. However, just when the life essence released by the fusion of the demonic energy and the fish demon's blood in Zhang Huijing's body had just repaired the corroded internal organs, the fish demon suddenly opened his eyes, showed a look of unwillingness in his eyes, and then closed his eyes again and died completely. And at the moment when the fish demon just died, the remaining demonic energy in Zhang Huijing's body immediately disappeared, making her completely lose the opportunity to strengthen her blood vessels and meridians. At the same time, the fishy smell emitted by the fish demon's blood without the demonic energy to continue to fuse also made her bend over and vomit immediately. "Brother, is she okay?" Looking at Zhang Huijing, who was holding her throat and vomiting desperately, Zhu Zhenjun asked with worry in his eyes. "Brother Zhu, don't worry, she is safe." After dispersing the sky eye that was paying attention to the changes in the demonic energy in her body, Zhang Fengjai nodded and gave an affirmative reply, then took out a talisman from his sleeve, ignited it with spiritual power, and threw it directly on the huge body of the fish demon. "Brother, leave some precious fish meat." Looking at the fish demon burned by the talisman flame and smelling the tempting aroma of roasted fish meat, Zhu Zhenjun suddenly thought of python meat, which is also a demon beast. Not only can he lose fat quickly, but he can also improve his physical fitness and strength, and greatly enhance his ability in that aspect. He immediately reminded him distressedly. "Brother Zhu, the blood and flesh essence of the fish demon is no longer of any use to you. Limited by the influence of cultivation and strength, although the blood and flesh of the fish demon also contain the essence of life, the concentration and purity of the life essence cannot be compared with the black giant python." For Zhu Zhenjun, who had already used python meat to improve his physique, the flesh and blood of the fish monster no longer had any effect of rapid weight loss, as well as improving physical fitness and strength. Unless it was a monster with a cultivation and strength that exceeded that of the black giant python. What a pity! After hearing Zhang Fengjai's explanation, Zhu Zhenjun's eyes flashed with a trace of regret, and he turned and walked to Zhang Huijing, who had just finished vomiting, and then explained the reason why he asked her to drink the blood of the fish monster, and put forward his own request in a very low voice. In response, Zhang Huijing, who was full of serious suspicion and distrust in her eyes, flatly rejected his request, and walked to the river to rinse her mouth and wash. Zhu Zhenjun returned to He Tong Tong without any concern, and said with a strange smile in his eyes, "Brother, the humidity is too heavy at night. I'm worried that Tong Tong will catch a cold. I'll accompany her back to the fish restaurant to change into thicker clothes." Then, he didn't give Zhang Fengjai any chance to speak at all, and directly pulled He Tong Tong away quickly. Zhang Fengjai, who didn't notice Zhu Zhenjun's abnormality at all, turned his head and continued to look at the burning fish monster's body, intending to wait until the fish monster's body was completely turned into ashes and clean up all the traces left by the fierce battle before returning to the fish house. "Little brother, are you an immortal god who can fly in the clouds and mist?" After washing up, Zhang Huijing saw Zhu Zhenjun and He Tong Tong, who left the river bank in advance, and a look of surprise immediately flashed in her eyes. Afterwards, she carefully adjusted the v-neckline to increase the depth of the ravine, and walked to Zhang Fengjai with a charming look, and then asked with tenderness and expectation in her eyes. Glancing at the two tall peaks that were almost all exposed, Zhang Fengjai's face instantly blushed, and he immediately shifted his gaze to look at the burning fish monster's body and denied it. "You misunderstood. I don't know the magic of flying in the clouds, nor am I an immortal god. I am just an ordinary person who practices Taoism." Faced with Zhang Fengjai's shy and evasive gaze and his denial, Zhang Huijing's tenderness was replaced by pride. She not only blocked him directly, but also deliberately raised her breasts to refute. "Little brother, although my education is only a junior high school diploma, I have traveled all over the country and have some experience. You can't fool me at all. If you are not an omnipotent god, how can you step on the river without sinking? How can you conjure up a sharp sword out of thin air, and how can you turn into a fish monster by just throwing out two pieces of paper?" Faced with the reasons for Zhang Huijing's rebuttal, Zhang Fengjai was speechless and didn't know how to explain. Because the three things she just mentioned are supernatural phenomena that modern science cannot explain at all, and even the excuse of using magic can't cover it up. After all, even a true magician would not be able to conjure up four carp monsters with a body length of nearly 10 meters. In Zhang Huijing's view, Zhang Fengjai's silence was a default that he was an immortal god, which made her kneel down excitedly, knocking her head hard, and making a request that surprised Zhang Fengjai. Gods and goddesses, when I was young, I had a dream that I was the peony fairy in the sky, and I was demoted to the human world because I violated the rules of heaven. According to the rules of heaven, only by receiving the grace of a god and conceiving his immortal seed can you ascend to heaven again and restore your identity as the peony fairy. Director Zhang, have you watched too many TV dramas and novels and have become paranoid? The dream Zhang Huijing just described is a combination of stories from the TV series Journey to the West, Liazai, Lotus Lantern, and some folklore. It is basically a symptom of random thoughts during the day and random dreams at night. If you just regard the scenes that appear in your dreams as dreams and memories, it will be a more unforgettable experience. But Zhang Huijing, who believed too much in the existence of ghosts and gods, mistook the illusory dream for reality because of the fierce battle between the fish demon and her Taoist skills. This not only showed her ignorance, but also gave Zhang Fengjai a considerable headache. Faced with Zhang Fengjai's slander, Zhang Huijing suddenly raised her head and retorted with an extremely angry expression. "My superior god, I am not delusional. What I just said is true. As long as you are willing to condescend to me, I will use time to prove all this." Then, she not only used actual actions to prove that everything she just said was true, but also prepared to use the cooperation of her jade hands and mouth to make him willing to give him the favor. In response to this, Zhang Fengjai, who had never experienced such excitement, suddenly felt that his mind was blank and he just let Zhang Huijing play with it without refusing. However, just as the zipper of the pants was unzipped, a beautiful ringtone suddenly rang out in the bag that Zhang Huijing left in the cornfield.